It's good to see you all. I'm really glad to join together for some study together. I hope you've had a good day, but even if you haven't, you've made it here. And so you can just know, all right, if it was rushing or waiting or whatever your experience was, for me, I know I was looking forward to 7 o'clock all day and I made it. And so I'm really glad to be with you all.
Hi, Rosalie.
Hi,
So
Maria.
yeah, let's
Well, I have to get my view changed. Wait a minute.
so what we'll all do is we can start with the technical stuff. All right. So
Right.
welcome to everyone. This is called Can You Find the Words? Spiritual Expression and Growth Through the Book of Psalms in an hour, I should say. and um and we're going to learn for 1 hour and then keep the Zoom room open for another 15 minutes so that we'll all have a chance to schmooze and enjoy the opportunity to connect, which is just as important as anything else that we're doing. Many thanks to Ned Hanover for serving as our uh, tech facilitator tonight. If you end up with some tech questions, feel free to private chat him to get some help. And for when I'm speaking, when I'm sharing material, it'll work best to have everyone on mute in order to be able to hear. And then when you're interacting, you can just go ahead and unmute and raise your hand, perhaps with the digital hand raise. If you go into participants and find yourself there, you should be able to give yourself a hand raise if I don't see your actual hand, so that you can participate. So let's make sure, is everyone's first and last name on your Zoom tile? If not, you can go ahead and rename yourself. I think you're all you. I think it looks right to me. So that'll help us connect as well. So thank you everyone
Mhm.
for doing that. And let's take a moment. If we were together in our space, I would be inviting us to turn around and find someone new. So I'll say, give it a try on Zoom by going into the chat and finding the name of somebody and private chat them and just say hello. If someone has private chatted a hello to you, go ahead and respond. So hopefully we've all had a chance to say hi to somebody. Okay. All right, everyone's had a chance to say hello? Good. So I think what I'd like to do is have us join together for the blessing for the study of Torah. And joining together on Zoom is a strange thing, but maybe just for this we could enjoy that cacophony together. All right, so let's try to join together off of mute. Together, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam
Asher
asher
Kedeshanu
kidshanu
B'mitzvotav
Tivanu
Asok
Asok
Divrei
Divrei Torah.
Torah.
Thank you, God, for this mitzvah of joining together and engaging in words of Torah. All right, Ned, if you are ready, yeah, good. I'm going to do some screen sharing, and I'm going to try to come off screen sharing when I can so that we can see lots of faces.
I also have a little bit of tech just to take care of before we get into that. Just want to mention,
Go ahead.
yes, that in all, excuse me, that this class will be recorded, and the audio, video, and chat will be archived unedited on Word of Shalom's Facebook page. And if you do not wish to be recorded, just mute your microphone, turn off your video, and refrain from participating in the chat. You will still be able to see and hear the class, and the class is recording. Okay.
Great.
That's it.
Important. Thank you so much, Ned. All right. To come together for study around Psalms, also, you may have heard the Hebrew Tehillim, I think is really interesting right now. And just to have the days of learning, I think, is so interesting right now. And many thanks to Ellen Poster and Malka Meister and your team for making it happen, because I feel like in addition to the tragedy that has come with the pandemic and the isolation that has come with that, one of the key threats, I think, right now to our spiritual well being is the threat of just stagnation. Maybe I'm not the only one who feels this blah sometimes, even amid the stress. And I think that when we engage in spiritual and intellectual growth, in learning together, I think that that is one of the ways to stand up to the blah, and to make sure that our lives don't stagnate, to make sure that we are always engaged in growth, even if we're living in a way that is more limited than we should be able to live. So thank you for coming on that growth journey with the congregation all along and tonight in this time of learning. A little bit of background on Tehillim. The book of Psalms is in the Tanakh. The Tanakh is the Hebrew term for the Hebrew Bible, and Tanakh is an acronym. So the T stands for Torah, the N for Nevi'im, and the KH at the end for Ketuvim, the writing. So Torah, prophets, and writings, which together make the Hebrew Bible. Even if you're speaking of it in translation, Hebrew Bible is still the proper name for it. Other traditions might call it the Old Testament. We're talking about the same thing. The order sometimes changes, but basically we're talking about the same thing, just so it's familiar. In the book of Psalms, which contains 150 Psalms, each of them its own chapter in the book. In the book of Psalms, you have this testament to the power of words. And there's so many ways to study those words. I'd like us to lean into the spiritual tonight. It could be really interesting to study from more of a literary point of view, and maybe I'll point out a few things, but we're not looking tonight at the larger structure. Instead, let's hear the words together. Let's really try to hear the words. Whose words are they? The book of Psalms would tell us perhaps they're David's words. Sure, maybe they are. Scholars would doubt that probably, but there's a tradition, maybe it's King David's words, maybe it's Korach's words, maybe it's from the time of the first temple, which is 6th, 7th, 8th century BCE. Maybe not. Maybe it's later after the return to Zion in the 5th century BCE. Who knows? They're not sure, but we're not going to answer those questions tonight. I think what we can say is the book of Psalms is very old, and it's been with us for a long time, and that'll be good enough. Many generations of our people have turned to the Psalms, and I would say that at any point in your life, if you are looking for the words, if you are looking for an expression of intense emotion of any kind, you could flip open the book of Psalms and find something that might speak to you. Maybe just flip it a few pages. If you're in a place of joy and you open up to sadness, flip it a couple of pages, you might just find what you're looking for without much of a roadmap, because it's all in there. I think the whole of human emotion is in the book of Psalms. Think with me for a moment. Can you name a few expressions or emotions in addition to the examples I just gave of joy and sadness? Maybe even pop into the chat. Can you think of any just quick thoughts? What are some emotions or some emotional experiences that you've experienced or could experience, or that human beings experience? Any thoughts? There's joy, there's sadness. What else is there? There's fear, despair, gratitude, confusion, hope. Beautiful. Contemplation. It's all in there for sure. Exasperation, excitement, compassion, anger,
Disappointment.
anxiety, remembrance, disappointment. Yes.
Fear.
Hope, fear. Good. Good. That's a good list. That'll take us a long way. Correction, patience,
Doubt.
doubt. Yes. Good. All right. Think with me now. In addition to all of these human emotions, many of us can identify with all or at least many of these different experiences and emotions. Another way to think about the book of Psalms is as a record of Jewish memory, because so often the Psalms will go back and recall something from Torah, but in its own light. And that's why if you look at our prayer book, which the Siddur, the Jewish Siddur, is really the daily experience of Judaism. Unlike the Torah, the Siddur is what we speak all the time. Much of the Siddur quotes from the book of Psalms. And so some of our understanding of those Jewish memories are actually through the words of Psalms and the imagery that's chosen and then repeated sometimes in our prayers. And so the specific Jewish memories that will pop up a lot in the book of Psalms and in our tradition, the first is creation. The second is revelation, meaning revelation at Mount Sinai, revelation of Torah, of our purpose. And the third is redemption. Redemption being symbolized in the crossing of the Sea of Reeds, the crossing of Exodus to liberation, and really any symbol for freedom or for hope. So we'll look, when we look at some of the texts together, we'll look at some of those Jewish memories and see, what is this psalm calling up? What is this psalm calling up that we might actually already be familiar with in its imagery? And the last thing we might look for, just to have a little bit of a literary appreciation, is, the Psalms are poems, and the oftentimes the biblical poet will give us parallelism. So oftentimes you'll see a synonymous parallelism in the Psalms, where basically the first half of the verse is saying what the second half of the verse says. So I think we'll be able to find an example or two of that together as well. To prepare for tonight, I studied a newer text for me. It's not where I've studied Psalms from before, just to take the opportunity. And I'll share with you, it's a 2-volume piece called Songs Ascending. It's by Rabbi Richard Levy of blessed memory, who was a professor of rabbinics at Hebrew Union College in Los Angeles, not my campus, so I never actually studied with him, but I thought that he would be an interesting, a different perspective on Psalms. And he was a beloved teacher of many of my classmates. And as I read his translation, which for me sounds different from a lot of others, it's so heartfelt, and it's creative, and there's a real appreciation for the Hebrew. So sometimes he'll lift something up that you might see a little differently because of the way he puts it out there. So we'll take a look. We'll take a look together. I thought we could start with an excerpt from Hallel. Some of the Psalms are grouped for certain purposes. For instance, Hallel is a grouping of Psalms that is recited on the festivals. For instance, there's a grouping of Psalms recited for Kabbalat Shabbat on Friday evenings that are set to different tunes. So I'd like to start us with I'd like to start us with a psalm from Hallel. So this is, I'm just giving us excerpts right now. These verses come from Psalm 114. The Hebrew for Psalm 114 is here, B'tzeit Yisrael. And I'm just giving you the Hebrew in case for some it'll be familiar. For some it won't be, no problem if it's not in your memory. But if it is, I want you to be able to find it. This is common for Hallel, for, let's say, if we're celebrating Sukkot or Shavuot or Pesach together in services, or at the end of the Seder, we might be reciting Psalms. So a common tune, a traditional tune for this is B'tzeit Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'am loes. So if that's familiar, that's what we're looking at, if that's in there somewhere. Okay, let's look at the English. Would somebody like to read these verses from Psalm 114? If so, you could just unmute and pop in.
I can read if you want.
Great. Thanks, Muriel.
When Israel went forth from Egypt, the house of Jacob from a people speaking barbarian, Judah became the place from which God's holiness went forth, Israel the place where God's sovereignty was displayed. The sea looked and fled. The Jordan is turning backward. The mountains rocked like rams, the hills like lambs. What's with you, sea? What that you are fleeing, Jordan, that you are turning backwards? Mountains rocking out like rams, hills like lambs.
Beautiful. Thank you, Muriel. All right. I think this translator has a sense of humor also. We'll see if you agree. But let's take a look at the whole, and then we'll pull out a couple of verses.
Excuse me. Can you just tell me again, what does halal mean? H-A-L-L-E-L?
Hallel, yeah. Hallel is the group of psalms recited for the festivals because they're joyful, because they're a gift. Hallel, you can hear, Hallel means praise, right? Like hallelujah means praise God. Yeah. Great question. So
Levi doesn't have the seventh. There's a seventh line.
No, yeah, don't blame him. It's me. I just chose from some verses to focus on for each. Okay. So look with me at the whole first. What is the Jewish memory? What is the Jewish memory being called on for Psalm 114? The three main Jewish memories that define our religion and address the main religious questions: creation, revelation, and redemption. Creation, where do we come from? Revelation, why? What's our purpose? And redemption, what's our hope? Where are we going? Those are religion's three key questions, you could say, and three key memories in Judaism. Which of the three is described here? Anyone can pop in on that. Is this calling to mind creation, revelation of Torah, or redemption from the slavery of Egypt to the freedom of the journey and the promised land?
I guess it's redemption.
Redemption?
Yeah.
I agree. It's redemption, right? And I mean, just the term Egypt is a good clue, right? Good. So here we are in this Psalm of Redemption. It's recited on in the Hallel for all of our festivals, but it's clearly for Pesach, it speaks to us especially. And in this Psalm of Redemption, now let's look at a couple verses. In verse 1, do you see this synonymous parallelism? Can anyone say what you see in the parallelism? Is anyone noticing it? You can pop in if you are.
It's going from the declarative to the raising sort of rhetorical questions about it, the same issues.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan turning backwards, the mountains rocking like rams,
Yeah.
and hills like lambs.
Yeah. Good. Oh, you're reading ahead though. Even just look at verse 1. Start with the first verse. Do you see how in the first verse, part 1 of verse 1 is pretty much saying the same thing as part 2, right? When Israel went forth from Egypt, the house of Jacob means Israel. It's the same thing. It's our people, right? from a people speaking barbarian. Who's speaking barbarian? Egypt. It's the same thing, right? So it's both parts of the verse are saying we went from a place we didn't get. We couldn't understand what they were saying, or there's something, right? Barbarian is the untranslatable. and in understanding with the term Egypt, the Hebrew is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim literally means constricted or narrow. So there was some narrow place from which we came. It was a place that we couldn't translate. It was a place where we couldn't relate to other people. We couldn't connect. We couldn't even communicate. And there's something about that is total constriction and narrowness from which we need to be freed. So that's the parallelism that you'll see often in the book of Psalms. And there's our redemption. Look with me at verse 3. Now, verse 3 is bringing us to the Jordan. The sea looked and fled, and the Jordan is turning backward. What is the Jordan here? What was the sea that was crossed in the story of redemption, in the Passover story?
The Red Sea.
The Red Sea, right. The Red Sea or the Sea of Reeds. So why are we talking about the Jordan River now? That's in a different area, right?
Mm.
What is the Jordan brought in about? The sea looked and fled. The Jordan is turning backward.
I did.
She can't see you.
Yeah, you can pop in. I can't see all the squares because I'm sharing the document. So you can pop in or you can virtually raise a hand.
Well, these were miraculous events.
Yes, the
Yes.
Exodus turns nature on its head. But where does the Jordan fit into the story, the Jordan River? At the beginning of the journey, we come through the Sea of Reeds. By the time we're at the Jordan, where are we?
Israel.
It's later, right? It's at the end of that journey. If we're coming up through the 40 years and then we're crossing the Jordan to get into Israel, we spend basically the rest of the Torah on this journey. And then actually after the Torah concludes is when, in the book of Joshua, is when we're actually able to think about crossing the Jordan. And so in addition to the redemption, Psalm 114 looks forward into the future of the crossing, that there are really two crossings going on here. Let me share this. This translation in verse 4, the mountains rocked like rams, the hills like lambs. And then again in verse 6, mountains rocking out like rams, hills like lambs. The rocking is sort of an interesting translation. So here's what's sort of interesting. If you look at B'tzeit Yisrael, and look with me at the 4th verse, where it says, Haharim Rakadu. Haharim, what's Haharim? Har is mountain or hill, right? So the mountains, Rakadu, means dance. The mountains are dancing, which is a beautiful image. Rabbi Levi comes in and he wants to play with the Hebrew for dance, which is Rakadu. And what does he notice about Rakadu? What is the English word that he wants to choose?
Rock.
Rocked, right? So you don't appreciate it unless you see the Hebrew has those same consonants, right? But the mountains rocked. You could say there's something interesting there because mountains perhaps are made of rocks, but I think that only a child of the 60s would come up with this, right? The mountains are rocking. The mountains like rocked out, he's saying. They rock out like rams. They're jamming. I don't know. But it's something that he can actually picture, this this joyful, the mountains rocking out. I love that because to me, it brings to mind, you know, the way that you can relate to language and text and prayer. You can relate to it as this distant description and maybe even something formal, or you can relate to it as something that's a little closer. Maybe it's more relevant. Maybe it's a little bit more intimate or even familiar. And sometimes I think he's taking this language and making it familiar. Like this is his expression. These are his words. This is his prayer. So the question I'll put to all of us is, can we find ourselves or any of our emotion in any of this language? Is there anything here that if you feel a sense of praise, is there anything here where you say, that could be my phrase? Or even if it's not a particular phrase, is there anything here where you'd say, the feeling it evokes is something I can identify with? Is there anything here that feels like, yes, these are my words too?
I mean, it's joyful.
It's joyful.
You know, rocking like rams, like lambs. That sounds like, you know, we're just having fun. We're full of joy.
Yeah. Yes.
What does the question mark mean at the end?
Oh, go back to verse 5, Marilyn. It's like a run-on sentence.
Oh, it's the
Right.
Oh, okay. Thank
What's with you? I mean, that too, right? That language. What's with you? I mean, who says that biblically, right? What's with you?
Yeah.
See that you are fleeing. Yeah, it's a continuation.
With the mountains rocking like rams and the hills like lambs, one could think earthquake, danger, but that's not what's going on here with the dancing and the rocking out. And it's a very positive, and it's almost a childlike image. It's nice.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be scary here. Yeah, I agree. All right. All right.
Why is it turning backwards?
The Jordan is looking back. Isn't that interesting? The river, the Jordan River, is turning back.
Yeah.
To if the people just crossed it, maybe it's turning back to look at the people crossing it, or who are in the process of crossing it. That's interesting, right?
Yeah.
That it's turning back and seeing perhaps it's where they came from.
Yeah.
Is it also possible that it's a metaphor for the Israelites moving from death and slavery to life, since the Jordan goes normally from the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea, but if it turns back, it's a metaphor for moving towards life?
That's interesting. Looking back to slavery, looking back in history, looking forward to life.
So memory, the idea of memory.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I like the way you put it, Henry, that right, a river moves. Yeah. I think that's really interesting. Yeah, a river moves. And there is a forward for a river.
To me, it sounds a little like childish and silly and fun. And I mean, an ocean doesn't flee and everything. It seems like a cartoon to me in a very lovely way. Like
it's almost fantastical. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really.
It's interesting. And yeah, I mean, this is sacred literature. And so I think it's interesting to go back and forth to think about these are our most sacred moments in the synagogue. And we can also find this familiarity or this playfulness. And I think the translator brings some of that out. And I think I don't know if it's my preference, his translation, but I like that it brings out a different way to look at it. All right, let's take a look at a psalm from Psalm 96 from Kabbalat Shabbat. Okay, and actually I'll skip to the Hebrew first in case it's familiar. This is Shiru Ladonai. There are several psalms that have Shir Ladonai or Shir Chadash. This one is Shir Ladonai, Shir Chadash, Shir Ladonai Kol Haaretz. And I cannot remember the tune that we would more frequently use at Rod of Shalom. I'm not a musician and the right song does not always come to my head. I am thinking of a tune that you may or may not know that goes like this. Shiru Ladonai, Shiru Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai Kol Haaretz. Is that familiar?
Yes, that's it.
Is that what you were thinking of, Muriel? Oh, good.
What we usually sing.
And then there's a different part, and it can sort of go in a round, I think, that goes, Shiru Ladonai Baruch Hu Shemo, Basru Meyom Leyom Yeshuato. So that's one of them. The idea is, it's joyful. Kabbalat Shabbat is joyful. This is the time of the week when we set aside all the other stuff. We try to set down our burdens and sing in joy. We sing from 6 different psalms to lead up to Lecha Dodi, representing the 6 days of the week. Alice, just unmute yourself.
I had a question. Does every psalm have its own melody? And does everybody know the same melodies for each psalm?
There's cancellation, so you can see the cancellation. So there are chants to different psalms, but what I'm singing is just modern composers who have settings, just like for lots of Hebrew songs and prayers. There are lots of modern composers who have settings. So the psalms are meant to be sung, and so there's lots of music that's been composed for the psalms. So like anything else, there are some more common ones, and that's what I was trying to get into my mind.
Okay.
So on this one, let's take a look at the English. Who'd like to read? Would someone like to pop in and read these verses from Psalm 96? Someone like to read?
I'll read.
Great. Thanks, Sadavi.
Sing to God a new song. Sing all earth, as though song itself were new. Sing to Adonai, praise the name, spread the good news from day to day of God's deliverance. Tell God's glory stories to all the nations, God's wonder tales to all the peoples. Make a simcha in heaven, let the earth rejoice. Let the sea squall and all sea life sing.
Thank you. Yeah, I interrupted you. Thanks, Sadavi. Beautiful. I'll go back to the Hebrew for a second. If you look at the final line here from verse 11, we also sometimes sing Yismechu Hashemayim for Kabbalat Shabbat, right? So I'm thinking one of the tunes is Yismechu Hashemayim, Hashemayim, Yismechu Hashemayim. That's one. Another that we've sung more recently is Yismechu Hashamayim V'tagel Ha'ar. I forget how it goes. Something like that. It's slower. So there are different tunes. Yismechu. Yeah, I can't remember how it goes exactly. So back to the English. What is the Jewish memory that Psalm 96 is calling up for us? Our choices are creation, revelation, or redemption. Pop in if you know. What are we calling on right now? Redemption. Interesting, because you see deliverance.
I'm seeing some creation there.
Yeah, you're seeing creation. So you see some deliverance. You see some. Where do you see creation, Susan?
A new song. Good. Yeah, new song.
Great. And then I would say that the creation is also in the heavens, the earth, the sea, that those are creations. And so we're lifting up creation. When it comes to Shabbat, we are lifting up both. We are lifting up creation and redemption. If you think of the Kiddush, the long version of the Kiddush that we recite on Friday evening calls to mind both creation and redemption. They're both in there. So where do we come from and where are we going? Where do we come from and what is our hope? So I see those also. Look with me at verse 1. Again, a different translation. Sing to God a new song, sing all the earth. And then Rabbi Levi says, as though song itself were new. Sing to God a new song, sing all the earth, as though song itself were new. I think in his commentary, he explains that part of the problem with sing to God a new song is that we're singing some of the oldest stuff when we say that, right? And we aren't always singing a particularly new song to God when we pray. We may be, but we might not be if you take it literally. So his commentary on that is sing as though song itself were new. Any thoughts on how that could be a meaningful idea?
Reliving the experience?
Oh, I love that. To be living in the experience, to be present in the experience, it won't feel old. It'll be now. That's beautiful. Other thoughts? Malka?
It's like when people fall in love, it's if they are the first people in the world who've been in love. Love was invented for them. So that's what I hear, and as if song itself were new.
Yes, as though I invented song. I'm so in this. Yes. Ellen?
I think that when you're reading the Psalms, you're bringing yourself to it on that particular day. So it feels new because you're thinking of it in a different way.
So I've never been to this moment before. I study a Torah portion. I've never been to that Torah portion in that same moment with that same experience and perspective. I've never been to this moment before. And so it's as though whatever it is new. It's fresh, which really takes me back to Sadavi. Like, what does it mean to be really present in the moment? Beautiful. Any other ideas? As though the song itself were new. I think about how easy it is to take things for granted, and how so much of what we maybe took for granted a year ago, we wouldn't so much so today. We think so differently about today. And I think about when we're able to return to something. Like, I picture the first time we can return together to the sanctuary. And I just wonder what it will feel like. I hope I didn't take for granted what it ever felt like to stand in that sanctuary. And yet, that place that's, for me, one of the most comfortable places in the world, it will feel different. There will be something different. There will be some new understanding we all have and share. We share so much of what's going on. And there will be something new that I hope I can hold on to. There will be something fresh and of gratitude, a new energy. Yes, that I think that I hope that we'll be able to hold on to that we'll have this elevated sense. And I wonder if it will feel as though, we are singing as though the song itself were new. Yes, discovery and wonder, beautiful. So I think that any moment has the potential for that, but there's sort of a recipe for it when it comes to certain experiences. And yeah, if we're lucky, I think we get it every day. When we wake up in the morning, if we really get it, we are able to appreciate every day we're given. Because I don't take tomorrow for granted. It means I can't take waking up for granted. So maybe there's something of that deep gratitude in this sense that we can sing as though the song itself were new. John, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you think about so much of, of the prayers that, that we say, they become very repetitive because you're saying the same over and over again. I mean, I think particularly not so much at our synagogue because we have this beautiful music, but you go into a conservative service or an Orthodox service and people are just, doing these things 3 times a day and just whipping through it, these very prayers. And you wonder how there's any meaning to any of that. And this makes you think that there is supposed to be some meaning to this. It's not, you don't say these words just to say them to get through it, that you did your job and you're done. And that's part of what sort of speaks to me. If you're really going to pray and have a spiritual moment, even though you look at these same Psalms every Friday night or whatever it is your practice is, it shouldn't be the same each time, because it sort of defeats the purpose.
It's interesting. So thanks, John. So it could be that when we change it up, when we literally change up the tune or the text, it could be that helps us keep the prayer fresh. It could also, though, be that if we are able to bring it, if we are able to bring a fresh sense, it could be a challenge to do the same thing or something similar in a way that's repetitive, that still invites some sense of what is new or meaning, that we're still able to bring that kavanah. Who knows? Maybe it's a different spiritual challenge. I spent years, I was, I grew up in the Reformed tradition, and then I entered college and I was exposed to lots of flavors of Judaism I hadn't experienced and couldn't necessarily follow and didn't really have literacy around. And so I dove in, and I decided that I was going to go to every Shabbat, Friday night, Saturday morning, and Saturday afternoon. I was going to go to Orthodox and conservative services in addition to my Reform service, and every week, because I wasn't looking for something spiritual. I was looking to know it. I wanted to walk into any Jewish setting and know it. And I was a little extreme maybe, but I did get, I think, a little bit of what John is talking about, in that there is a repetition that was happening. It was the same thing every time. Now, it helped learn it. I'll say it's great for literacy, right? It's like drilling. But I do find that there's something to, what other traditions might call a mantra or something. There's something to the repetition that if you don't have to put all of your intellectual energy into figuring out what it is, because you already know what it is, then there's a release that can happen where you are sort of allowing this other door to open. And that's sort of an interesting spiritual experience also.
No, I agree with that, Rabbi. I mean, I was in a conservative synagogue for years, and after you learn the prayers and the candlelation, you almost sort of go into a, it becomes almost a form of meditation after a while, because you don't really have to focus so much on the words. It's really the spirit. And there is something very comforting being in a group of people, even if it seems like, it's a completely foreign kind of thing if you were to walk into it. But if you're in that, you sort of feel like you're part of a bigger meaning. So
yes. And I think different traditions, I'm not interested in combining traditions in the blend, but I think different traditions have discovered that on their own. And Judaism has discovered that also. And I agree, Betsy, there's a mantra meditation that exists in both spaces. And you can actually look at some Jewish prayer through that lens as, okay, what is the language being used? And how is the language, just the sound, maybe it's alliteration, how is that helping us to get to a different place? It's interesting how repetition can sometimes serve us and sometimes not serve us, right? So maybe we all find something new in the song is, I think, at least step one of the challenge. There was, yes, Benzion.
I think the power of the nigun is that the nigun doesn't have words. So there's no need to think about it and fuss about it and disagree or agree, or it's just the music, just the sound, the melody in and of itself.
Terrific example. Exactly. And the nigun really comes out of Hasidic tradition. When I say Hasidic, I don't mean the ultra-Orthodox people in Brooklyn wearing black hats. I mean the original from a few hundred years ago, the original Hasidic thought, which was all about spirituality and joy and not intellectualism. So it was release the intellectual, probably in a way that was probably a little too extreme for us Reformed Jews, but we still can learn something from the idea of releasing for moments into that joy. And the nigun is one of the tools for that.
One of our choir rehearsals with Erin, Cantor Erin, was spent. She used the whole time. We sang niguns over and over.
Yeah.
I came out of the room. I was high. I mean, it was just awesome.
Yes, awesome. I agree. Awesome. I want to just take us back to the very end of Psalm 96 so we don't lose verse 11. This translation, again, just brings a smile to my face. Make a simcha. So often we see it translated as like the heavens rejoice. Let the heavens rejoice, let the earth sing. It says, make a simcha in the heavens. Make a simcha. I think that's not a bad phrase to take with us when we're trying to tap into joy. Make a simcha, which is, simcha is a Hebrew word, but it's often used just in conversations. Simcha is a joyful occasion, right? A wedding, a bar mitzvah, a bris, a simcha. So Shabbat is supposed to be a simcha. That's what our tradition wants to have in our ear. This idea on Shabbat, we rest and we make a simcha. We set down some of our worry and we make a simcha if we can. All right, let's take a look at one more psalm, which is Psalm 69. This is not coming from a recognizable grouping of psalms for us. This is, although it does actually, I note in it, it does contain a quotation from Matovu, from within the verses of Matovu, the daily morning prayer Matovu. So would somebody like to read Psalm 69 on worry? Somebody like to pop in and read?
Oh, I will.
Was that you, Jane?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Deliver me, God, for waters are coming to threaten my life. I have sunk into deep mire. There is no standing up. I have come into the deepest depths. The current has carried me away. I am weary with crying out. My throat is burning. My eyes fail, waiting for my God. I am my prayer to you, Adonai. May it arrive in an acceptable time. God, in the greatness of your covenantal love, answer me with the truth of your deliverance. From Matovu. Don't let the watery current carry me away. Don't let the deeps drown me. Don't let the cavern close her mouth over me. And do not hide your face from your servant. Draw near to me. Redeem me.
Thank you, Jane. I actually didn't include Hebrew for this just because I don't think it's a familiar passage, so I wasn't sure it would help us. It's powerful stuff, right? I started you on the joy and then brought on the worry. I think it's powerful. A couple of notes in just looking at it. First of all, in the big picture, I'm calling it worry. You can call it whatever you would. In the second verse, the waters are coming to threaten my life. What is the image? The water
Drowning. Someone's drowning in the water.
Yeah.
Someone's drowning. And what in our Jewish memory, where is our fear of drowning?
Across the Sea of Reeds.
Yeah.
Crossing the sea, right? The moment before the sea parts, we have a problem. This language, the Hebrew is ad nafesh, meaning until one's nostril. And so the threat is that the waters rise until one's nostril. When the nostril is hit, that is your life. Nafesh doesn't literally mean nostril only. It means nafesh, like life. My life is gone. And so, and the story, the midrash of Nachshon crossing the sea is that when he stepped into the Sea of Reeds before it parted, he stepped in until it was ad nafesh, until his nostril until his life. And so here too, we have that image of the drowning as the threat to life. In verse 3, when Rabbi Levi chooses words like into the deepest depths, that's a signal that the Hebrew is using alliteration. And so he is choosing alliteration, whether or not it's the exact word he wants or the best word for it. He wants to give us that sign in the deepest depths. Look with me at verse 4. I am weary with crying out. My throat is burning. My eyes fail, waiting for my God. So a question, why? Why does the psalmist or the poet, why does this writer need to wait for God? If God is always present, why these words, I am waiting for my God? Any thoughts on that? Why is this psalmist describing waiting for my God?
Maybe God isn't always present for him.
Maybe God isn't always present, or for him, maybe this writer doesn't always sense God's presence. So it could be waiting for my God. It could be waiting for a sense of God's presence, waiting to feel it, waiting for a readiness, waiting that I would be ready to feel God's presence, maybe. Others, Debbie?
Or waiting for God to do something.
Waiting for some sign, some action, some change. And for those who believe that God is pulling some strings, you know, for a different outcome even.
Yeah, I'm drowning here. I need you to do something.
Part the sea already.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I need some dry ground, please. Like, get the vaccine already. Let's go. You know, could these scientists have worked any faster? Come on. So
which one of the three is this? Is this creation, redemption, or the third one, which was revelation? Which one is it?
I see redemption because of the imagery. I think it's calling on the imagery, but I don't think it's calling on the sense of hope in redemption, because emotionally it's just in a different place. Although I think hope is in it, but I don't think hope is the primary for me. You know, you can read it differently. For me, I don't think hope is the primary. And yet, if I just go back to the text towards the bottom, if I look at verse 18, I just think this is beautiful. Verse 18, and do not hide your face from your servant, meaning do not hide your face from me. Draw near to me, redeem me. Maybe if we're in worry, that's incredibly hopeful. To continue to have hope in God's presence, in God's help, in God's redemption, in God's nearness, maybe that's ultimate hope as well.
And haven't we sung, I probably can't sing it right, but the don't hide your face from me?
Yes. Yes, Debbie Friedman has a beautiful setting. Yes.
What I see in this psalm is from verse 4 on, it's like I was fighting against the current, but I've given up, and now it's only God that can save me. And that turns into, I guess you're saying, some hope, with still hoping that God will draw near.
I've done all that I can.
Rabbi, one of the things this thing reminds me of, it's a counterfactual. It's almost the opposite of the Jonah story.
Oh, say more.
Because, Jonah wants to go into the sea. He does not want to be near God. He doesn't want to hear God. He just wants to go away. He doesn't want to talk at all. And he basically is in the corner bringing all these horrible things on the people, when the ship would throw him out. And he's more than happy to do that because he just doesn't want the responsibility. This is somebody who's sort of in that watery situation, pleading for God to be present and to help get out of that. I mean, it's interesting. The imagery reminded me sort of the opposite of Jonah for some reason.
Terrific. Yeah, Jonah's fleeing God's presence. And this poet is saying, come near.
Right.
Beautiful. I'm right. There's water in both. Yes. I want to point out also verse 14 at the beginning, this translation, I am my prayer to you, Adonai. I am my prayer. Not just these are my words of prayer, right? But I am my prayer. Does anyone else notice that? Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to just also say it's very modern in its feeling. So much modern literature deals with alienation. I'm thinking of like Stevie Smith. I guess her, because of the watery images, drowning, not waving, and except this one is he's reaching out for God, whereas in something like Stevie Smith's poetry, there's no one there coming to rescue.
And here we don't quite have an answer yet, but we sure have a hope, and we have a sense of faith. Look for all of us. Let's all look and see. Can everyone find in here in this English text a phrase that you would use, that you would say, I wouldn't mind putting that on a Post-it, but that phrase could be a way to express something I feel sometimes. Can anyone identify?
I am my prayer to you is really is wonderful. It really to me a lot.
I like the draw near to me, redeem me.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let the deeps drown me. That sounds like I could see a picture of it.
That sounds like what, Marcia?
I could see a picture of it, on a poster. Don't let the deeps drown you.
Yes, the imagery in Psalms. I mean, there's so many posters. There's so many memes that could come from it. Yes. Any others?
Don't let the cavern close her mouth over me.
Yes.
I am weary with crying out. I'm thinking of all the demonstrations.
Oh, beautiful.
Around
Beautiful.
racism and all, and the constant crying out for help, and nothing's happening.
Terrific.
I see the such profound despair, but he hasn't totally given hope.
That is incredible, Lee, isn't it?
It is amazing to be. I mean, actually, I have such a vision in my head right now of the worst despair a human being should ever feel from these words.
Yes.
And yet there's still hope in 19.
There's still hope. That's the poet gets to hope. And just, waking up the next day, that's hopeful too. It's all right. Just moving on sometimes just takes some hope as well. Moving forward sometimes.
And even writing the poem.
Yes.
Is hopeful because it's not just despair. He's doing something creative with his despair.
Yeah.
And giving us some words. It's generous too. Well, I hope that that this is enough of a taste to give us some curiosity to continue to open our eyes. And even when you're in a prayer book and it has a footnote, a citation to a psalm, notice, oh, this comes from Psalms. This is where the source is. I want to close this up, but I can't leave us on despair, even though there's a little bit of hope in here. So I thought I would come to just a verse of something else. Psalm 23, verse 1. Psalm 23 may be our most well-known psalm because of its role in mourning and in funerals, but also I believe that in some circles it was a daily, I think in Philadelphia public schools, it was recited daily, right? That's what I'm told by my friends here.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
Yes.
I always thought it was Christian because I couldn't believe they would do anything Jewish. You know?
Well, you know, it is Christian, but where do you think they got their Torah from, you know?
I didn't know it back then.
Yeah, so the book of Psalms is shared by other traditions for sure. It also probably, Marcia, was English that, you know, who knows if it would have been English of your choosing. But here, I'm giving you a gender neutral version. It's interesting that the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me, right? The he's in it. That's the only text where I still use gender specific. If I'm at a funeral, because so many people know it, it means they can join in, but we'll see how long I do that. But that's still out there. It's still, everyone seems to know it. Just verse 1 I wanted to leave us with though. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, a psalm of David. Adonai, my shepherd, I lack for nothing. I don't know if there's anyone who really has no wants in the world, but I will leave us with the thought that I lack for nothing is a really interesting way to try to end where we began, with a sense of gratitude. How can we find some gratitude in what is? How can we find a sense of enough? And perhaps to just leave us with this question: what would it take? What would it take to be able to speak those words every day? I lack for nothing. How can I get there? Maybe that's another post-it for us, you know, because I think I'm probably not the only one who could use some help in getting to that place. I lack for nothing. But it's my prayer for all of us, both because I think that it helps us find more wholeness within, and because if we're whole from within, perhaps we can also be generous outside of us. And so we can be more whole in our relationships and in our connections and in our world and in our community. So here is to a sense of wholeness, a sense of gratitude and lacking nothing, and for appreciation every time we get to learn something new and to intellectually and spiritually grow. So thank you all for joining together for that opportunity. So good, as always, to be with you. I know we're going to have a chance to have an evaluation. Look at that. Ned, my partner, has already put it into the chat. Would you like folks to complete that now, or to yes, I'm getting
It's not
that.
necessary. No, at any point, Tim, yeah, do it. You know, it only takes a couple of minutes to do.
Okay, so you can do it now if you'd like, or you can copy it into your work and do it later. And we're going to just have these moments to keep our chat, keep our Zoom open for 15 minutes and have a chance to say hello.
All right, and if you're doing multiple classes, you can just do one at the end. Actually,
one evaluation, great.
Yeah, there's one form that addresses every single class, so you can do it one at a time or all at once.
Got it. Oh, Ilana, I see your hand up. Did I miss you? Do you want to unmute? Do you have something to share? You're muted still.
Okay. So what I wanted to say is the psalm that we read before the last one, all about the despair of that person. It reminds me, the faith that it speaks of reminds me of the story of when the Jews in the concentration camp decided to put God on to be judged. They spent all night judging God, and then they said their prayers in the morning. I mean,
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yes. Right. And that's so Jewish, right? And if it's so Jewish to be able to say, I'm angry, I'm arguing with God, I might not even believe in God, and yet there's still that connection and that willingness to re-engage. Like, I'm not done with this. I'm
Right.
grappling and I'm not done with this. So thanks, Ilana. All right. Really wonderful to learn with all of you. I think we're just all coming off of mute and saying hello. Yes.
Absolutely.
Great. Please
Thank
do.
you.
Good to see you.
Hello. Thank
That
you
was
so
great.
much.
It was wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd
Beautiful.
like to
Do
do
more
more
of
of
these.
this.
That's right. We've got two
You
more
mean-
tomorrow and one on Friday.
Yeah, but the Psalms classes, do you have
Oh,
time,
okay.
Rabbi? To do more?
Yeah, as
Wonderful.
part of Torah study, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to do
Aren't you
some
doing,
Psalms.
aren't you studying Psalms, Muriel, in the morning?
And this is a different approach.
Very different.
Oh, okay.
It's very different.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Thanks.
Very nice.
Thank you, rabbis. Wonderful. Just
Bye.
wonderful.
Good to be with you.
And the same. Good to be together.
You all Friday? Oh, or maybe tomorrow sometime.
I was planning on, I'm planning on it. I will be on tomorrow. But thank you again. This was wonderful. Have a good evening, everybody.
Take care.
Great night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Right.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I went into yesterday's day of learning 4 hours late, and I couldn't get in because I had written down the wrong thing. Was if